Hello, and welcome to an extra special episode of The Joy of Coding, episode 208. Hello, how are you? It's so good to see you. It's been a while. It's been a couple of weeks since I've streamed. Obviously, been working from home. As many of you probably, hopefully are aware of, there is, in many countries around the world, and including my own Canada, and in Ontario where I live, there is a little bit of a, there is guidance to work from home because of the COVID-19 pandemic that is currently underway. So I am currently in my basement. You probably can't tell that. I have a green screen behind me, but if I were to take the camera off and I'm going to show you a very cluttered desk. A very, very cluttered desk. Apologies. Here's my 3D printer. And just a super cluttered desk. There's a screwdriver there, a guitar pick, my laptop, some filament. But yeah, I'm at home. This is not the normal state of things, as with many things that are going on right now. It's not the normal state of things. I'm working from home, and we're gonna see if this works out. I might, this stream might not work out because I'm using my home Wi-Fi. So there might be dropped frames, there might be hiccups. We're gonna get through it. It's gonna be okay, and that's true for all of this COVID-19 stuff. We're gonna get through it. We're gonna be okay. Let's get down to work. Let's do this. What's going on today? All right. So as I said, today is episode 208. No plan survives breakfast. I want to reinforce that particularly today because, like I said, things could go horribly wrong. None of this is pre-scripted. None of it's pre-planned. Who knows? I might get stuck. Things might fall apart. I might, go down a rabbit hole. Who knows what'll happen today? I'm capturing software development in the raw. And if things go wrong, I'm gonna try and sort it out. And by say things going wrong, it could be like the Wi-Fi dropping, but it also might be, a patch I'm working on or an idea that we have during the course of the stream does not pan out, and we have to back out, or we have to abandon an idea, or all the code we write might end up getting thrown out because the idea is no good, or something along those lines. That's real software development. That happens. That happens. And so I'm trying to capture that. So if you're hoping to just see like straight up competence porn, as they call it, where like I go from A to Z and something perfect emerges, this is not the stream for you. Well, what you're likely to see is a lot of meandering and sort of trial and error as I sort things out. I also want to point out that there is an episode guide to The Joy of Coding. If this is if this is new to you, there is an episode guide. But before I go into that, I should point out that there is an agenda. This is the document that we're looking at right now, the agenda, and you should have a link to this, especially if you want to be able to click on any of these links. The video itself is unfortunately non-interactive, so you can't click on these links, but you can if you have a link to the agenda. And if you're watching this on YouTube, check out the video description for a link to the agenda. If you're watching this on Air Mozilla, then there's a link to the agenda in the handouts section. And if you're watching this on Twitch, I don't know what we're gonna do because I don't have Twitch open. I'm actually, I guess I should open Twitch in the background here. Maybe I'll just do that. I'll open up Twitch in the background and I will drop the link into the Twitch chat. I worry about straining, like doing more network connections than necessary. So if I pause the video, maybe that'll help and I can drop that into the Twitch chat like that. But I won't be monitoring the Twitch chat. So if you have stuff that you want to talk about, maybe you want to communicate with me, what I highly recommend you do instead of talking in the Twitch chat is to join us on Matrix. So you can get a free a Matrix account. That's where there's a bunch of us that are hanging around in Matrix, and if you want to talk to me while I stream, come join Matrix. And if you're not sure what Matrix is or how to join, go to the agenda, the link that I just dropped in. Down here under chat, there's this link to documentation on how to join. It's a free account, and you get access to the live hacking channel. So come join us. So as I was saying, there's an episode guide. You should check it out. It's got all the episodes up to the most recent one, 207. with a couple of missing episodes here and there, but that's because I didn't stream on those days and the episode numbers just skipped. But it's completely viewer driven, and you should check it out. And if you ever want to contribute something to maybe this episode or a previous episode or a future episode, you can send me a pull request to the episode guide, because like I said, it's completely viewer driven. If there's addenda or corrections, or you want to expand on something, just, you know, send me a pull request to the repository. The episode guide is there for you to modify as you see fit. So I'm very liberal in my merges. And a special shout out actually to Danny Colin, who most recently sent in a pull request that fixes a bug where the individual episode guides weren't getting their page titles set. So thank you, Danny. All right, that's enough of that. And I've already talked about the Wi-Fi, and I've apologized in advance about Wi-Fi. What are we working on today? Well, what I'm hoping we can do is a couple of things. I mean, I might skip around a little bit as per usual, but the first thing I'm going to look at is this intermittent test failure that I caused because of a patch I landed having to do with some of the about home performance stuff I've been working on. So one of the things that I've been working on recently, excuse me, is to make it so that about home, that's the default home page that you see whenever you launch Firefox. Whenever you launch it, we want to be able to show it as soon as possible. And one of the things we do, or one of the things I'm trying to do, is caching that document that gets generated, because right now it's dynamically generated. There's this, you know, state object that gets created, and it gets thrown into this function that, you know, React happens, and then a document is generated. And we want to take advantage of the fact that between browser sessions, when the browser is shut down, it's unlikely that your browser state, like your history, is likely going to change or anything, so that we can retrieve the most recent document that was generated before you shut down, and then just like spit it out as soon as possible at startup. That's the goal. That's what we're hoping to see. And the idea is that by doing that, we can skip a whole bunch of the work that's done to dynamically generate that initial document. Mossip mentions that it seems to be basically impossible to get from the matrix.to link to this room on chat.mozilla.org. Well, that's unfortunate. It's possible that I've given the wrong link. Traditionally, I've been giving this link to the live hacking channel. This is how it's supposed to work whenever I click the share link inside of Matrix. So if this is broken for you, if you're trying to get access to Matrix and you can't, I'm sorry. What you can do is, once you create your free account, if you go to like riot.im and you get started, you like launch in your browser, you start the app. Oh, I might actually already have an account. So yeah, I already have an account. Hold on, let me log out. Log out, sign out. That's okay. I don't have any encrypted messages. I don't want my encrypted messages. Sign out, Riot. What you doing? Okay, so if you create a new Riot account or a Matrix account, you can do that by clicking Create Account here at the bottom. Create one on this free kind, and you just need to provide like a username and a password. Then I believe with this information, by clicking on one of these, you can join the channel, I think. I see. Mossip seems to think that if you've created an account using chat.mozilla.org, which is another way of signing into the chat. So if you go to chat.mozilla.org, you can also create a, oh boy, that's not what I want to do. You can also create a chat account there. It looks like this, chat.mozilla.org. But this one, you have to actually sign in using like one of these single sign-on services, like your Firefox account, GitHub, or a Google account, or if you have a Mozilla LDAP, you can use that. But most of you probably don't have those, but Mossip does. And if you don't want to use one of these, then that's why I offered the matrix.org choice, where you don't have to use any of these single sign-on services. You can just like create a free account. But if you do it this way, then apparently it's actually, this link is no good, the one that I posted. So I apologize for that. If you are signing on through chat.mozilla.org, check out the list of rooms on Mozilla's chat instance, Matrix instance. It's the live hacking room. Come join us there. Okay. So where was I going? The content, so part of the work for stashing and retrieving this cached about home document, that involves giving the about home document, which loads right now in a content process, some special privileges to be able to write to this cache and read from this cache. And we don't want to expose those special privileges to every kind of content process, because we don't want like some evil website out there to be able to write to this special cache when they're not supposed to. We really only want about home to do it. And so the way we're doing this is by having about home and about new tab and about welcome and a couple of different about pages have their own special content process. And it's called the privileged about content process for lack of a better, it's bad. Naming is one of the hardest problems in computer science, and that's a perfect example. A privileged about content process is what we're currently calling it. And I've turned it on nightly. If you are running, if you're running nightly and you go to about home, like if I look at, I don't know if you can see the PID in the tooltip here, but it says 20916. And if I go into my, where is it? If I go into my process monitor and I look PID sort 20916, 20916, it's Firefox, I don't know if you can read this. I can't zoom either, but it says Firefox Nightly CP privileged content. So this is running in this special privileged content process, and that's on nightly. Great, that's what we wanted. And the good news is there's like an additional bonus impact in that it seems like having the privileged about content process enabled caused an improvement to how long it takes to go from startup to loading about home, just by having it run separately. And I suspect that this is due to, well, actually, I'm not entirely certain why this is the case, but I suspect it's because the privileged about content process doesn't have to worry about loading other pages that you might be trying to load at the same time as about home. Like maybe you're configured to load about home and maybe other documents, and because about home's running in its own process, it doesn't have to worry about getting blocked loading other documents. I'm not entirely certain, but you can see this nice healthy drop off in the median of time to about home top sites paint right around here whenever we enabled the privileged about content process. Oh, sorry, this is beta. Let me show you the nightly one. This is a different drop off. That's a different improvement. The one I wanted to show you was a nightly, and that's right around. It's smaller, but it's here. Let me choose 75 and 76. So this is the medians, 70. It's like for 75, we were floating around 3.58, 3.71, 3.65 is the median number of seconds to go from process launch to seeing about home first paint. And now the median is more like 3.53, 3.33, 3.35. So like it dropped right around the beginning of, the nightly 76 cycle. And right at the beginning of the nightly 76 cycle is when we enabled the privileged about content process. So I suspect that it had something to do with that. But I don't know why yet, but it's having an improvement. But there's a but. But one of the problems is that by enabling the privileged about content process, I have some intermittent failures that have been filed on me. And this is one of them. So there's this test, browser_bug 724239, and what its job is to let's examine this test and walk through what it does. It does two things. So the first thing it does is it opens up this new tab at the about blank document, and then after loading about blank, it loads example.com, and it waits for that browser to finish loading example.com. And then it ensures that about blank wasn't added to the session history. Okay, because it's never really useful if you go to like about blank. So here I am at about blank. Well, how do I reproduce this? if I can reproduce this way. I can show you sort of the behavior. Whenever you create a new tab, I'm going to say go to a blank page. So my default is now about blank, and if I go to like mozilla.org, we don't want the back button to take you back to about blank because there's no point. About blank is useless. However, if we have about new tab as our home page and we go to mozilla.org, we do want to be able to go back here. That's the difference. That's what this test is testing. So it tests that about blank wasn't added to session history. That's the back forward like list of sites that you've been to, and it makes sure we can't go back. That's good. And then this is the one where we load new tab, and so it loads about new tab in a new tab, and then it loads example.com, and then in the event that we have to change process between example.com and about new tab, which is the case whenever we're doing process flipping to the privileged about content process, because example.com runs in a web content process and about home or about new tab now run in the privileged about content process. So we have to do a process flip when we transition from one to the other. We have to wait for this SS tab restored event because we do this like process flip, and that involves doing like a swap of session state. And so this is how we like wait for the tab restoration to occur. And then we check to see whether or not we can go back. The way we do this is by checking gbrowser can go back, but you could have also, this is like a shortcut for, in the current window, the current selected tab, can we go back? That's what this is asking. And we want to make sure that we can go back. And for the most of the time, this test passes. However, some of the time it doesn't. So this is a try push I did yesterday with some logging, and we can see that I've got like a bunch of retriggers of the test where it's a bunch of tests, but the test that we care about is running in this BC11 suite. And I've got 3, 6, 9 instances where they all go green, but one where it doesn't. So it went wrong one time, and that's good because I added some logging. And I'm hoping that by looking at this logging, we can figure out what is going wrong. So let's look at this logging together and try and figure out what's happening. I haven't really, I noticed this morning that the log was here, but I saved looking at the log for this stream, so we can now investigate ourselves. And what's really nice about this is we can actually look at logging for when it works and logging for when it doesn't work. And I think that will be really, really useful because now we can like compare the behavior between the two whenever it works and it doesn't work, and that might make it more obvious what's going wrong. So I've got this, this is the log where it didn't work, the test failed. So let's now open up the log. So on the left we've got the good case, and on the right we've got the bad case. We have to remember that, and that's one of the things that I've kind of turned into like a habit, is if I'm comparing something where something is bad and something is good, I put the good on the left and the bad on the right. Good on the left, bad on the right. And a really silly, nerdy way that I remember that is because in the Lord of the Rings, there's, I don't remember what it was, Gundabad? Gundabad, something called Gundabad. So the Misty Mountains, Mount Gundabad. It's a mountain in like the Tolkien universe, and that's how I remember left to right. Gundabad. Good on the left, bad on the right. Gundabad. It's really super nerdy. So let's take a look at where things have gone wrong. So the test I care about, again, is bug 724239. Bug 724239. Let's find where it starts executing. Right here is where it starts executing. And I'm going to snip this out, and I'm going to start putting it in our notes. Wait, yeah, this is the good case. That's why it's test pass. So I'm going to snip that out, and we're going to put it in our notes. I've linked to the notes here in the agenda, so you can follow along. So with logging, here is I'm going to say with first round of logging, here are my observations. Okay, good. And then I'll paste in the log. Okay, and now bad, Gundabad. The test starts here. And then we're going to examine them side by side and try and figure out what's different. So here's the test unexpected fail. That's what we want. Okay. Now I've pasted the fail, the bad case in here in Evernote. I'm going to zoom out a little bit to make this easier to read for myself anyways. Unfortunately, that makes it harder for you to read. But one of the things I'm going to do actually is I'm going to split this out in a new window. And then we can look at them side by side. It doesn't allow me to create more than one. So I'm going to have this one, I'm going to look at, again, good to bad. I'm going to look at good on the left, and I'm going to look at bad on the right. And we're just going to start comparing. And unfortunately, because of the size of things and the line length and whatnot, they're not going to be perfectly aligned, but that's okay. I'm just looking at behavior. And a lot of this stuff is noise. A lot of this, because these were debug builds, there's stuff in here about like creating DOM windows. They get created, that's what the plus plus is for, and then they get shut down, that's what the minus minus is for, and like there's just a bunch of noise in here that we do not care about. What I care about is the logging I added. So I'm gonna wait until I find some logging. So this is some of the logging I added right here, and it's a little tricky to see, like to thresh out the noise from the chaff, so to speak, noise from chaff. But what I actually want to do first is, and I probably should have done this when I wrote the patch, is I want to ignore this test. The about blank test is unrelated, or at least I think it's unrelated. Maybe it has to do with some part of the problem, but until I know that for sure, I'm going to try and ignore it and just look past the point where it's done running. So I'm looking for the about blank wasn't added to session history message, and then I'm going to go past that. So I'm looking for like a test OK. Blank. Where's test OK? Yeah, okay. Okay, so this is part of the problem. I'm gonna tell you right now, part of the problem is the ordering of messages is not great here, because the test pass occurs here, and then the test fail for the other test happens here. And that's because the test messages are buffered. These like buffered messages were logged earlier at like a second before, and then they're all like flushed out here. So I can't actually like see them in order, like when the pass occurred. So I can't rely on that. I have to go and look at the logging I did to try and like notice when the blank loaded. And I'm also going to want to do the same thing here. So like loading about new tab, doing navigate and restore. When did I have to look at the logging patch I added. One sec. So I can tell when the test starts because I say loading about new tab. That's good. So everything above this I can ignore. Presumably this is the like the about blank test occurred somewhere up here. So I can ignore everything above that. That's part of, I find, an interesting part of looking at logs is instead of trying to find what you're looking for, is trying to quickly determine what you can ignore. That sometimes helps too. So loading about new tab, we're doing a navigate and restore, starting async navigate and restore, we flush the tab state, wait for about new tab to load, because that's like the first thing we have to do is we have to load about new tab and then navigate from one to the other, from new tab to example.com. So new tab, loading new tab causes us to do a process flip. And I wonder if that's where things are going wrong. Hold on a second. So we load about blank, and then we load about new tab. There's going to be a process flip here when we load about new tab. And it doesn't look like we are prepared for that. Instead, we wait for the browser to stop. And maybe that's enough. Browser stopped, about new tab. Did I add a logging near there? Waiting for new tab to load. And then I ask, will we need to change process? Okay, so waiting for browser load of about new tab. Then we do a process flip. And then we say that we can't go back. And that's fine because the original tab was blank. So that's good. We don't want to go back. And that matches here. Can't go back. And now we're dispatching an SS tab restored event because we've gone from about blank to about new tab. We didn't catch it, but there it is. And then we say that we loaded about new tab. Okay, so I don't think my original hypothesis that the process flip from about blank to about new tab isn't being handled. At least we should handle that in the test, but I don't think that's what's causing the problem, because in both cases, in the good and the bad case here, we wait. Like the browser loaded about new tab occurs after the SS tab restored event occurs, so I think we're okay. We determine that we will not need to change process so that's interesting. We should need to change process. Will we need to change process? False. We do a navigate and restore, waiting for load stop. Then we do a navigate and restore. And that's asynchronous. And then web navigation for a location change occurs. Can go back as true, can go forward as false. Here, can go back as false, can go forward as false. And that's the difference. Can go back was set false here. And then I think we close the tab. Whereas down here, okay, I think I'm starting to develop a hypothesis of what's going wrong. My suspicion, so one of the things to realize about process flipping and doc shells and all of this stuff is that anytime you create a new, like when we transition from one process to another, we are doing what's called a remoteness flip or a process swap or whatever you want to call it. But we're transitioning a document, like a browser, from one process to another process. And the way that works is we scoop out the session state of the current tab in the current process. So we like say, hey, give me all your session state, and we scoop it all out and we hold it in the parent process. Then we like remove the browser element from the DOM and force it to go into the next process that it needs to go to. And then we blast down the session state for the that we had preserved. So it's almost like a brain transplant. We do a brain transplant. And one of the things that happens whenever you do this like brain transplant and you put the browser back into the DOM in that new process is that it creates in its content process a doc shell. And one of the first things you do whenever you create a doc shell is by default, you create a blank document. You create a new blank document. And I suspect that we are hearing a location change for that initial blank document. And that's why we're told we can't go back. We haven't reached the point yet where we've loaded the About New tab document. But the test quits before we can do that. And there's a little bit of a race here. That's what I think is going wrong. So how do I test this hypothesis? Well, first of all, let's write it down. Let's write down the hypothesis. Whoopsie daisy, I did not mean to zoom the window. Okay. So, hypothesis. Whoopsie. I'm not used to this keyboard yet, working from home. You'd think I would be used to this keyboard working from home. I've been working from home for like a week and a half, but like, this is not my work keyboard, and I'm not used to it yet. Okay, so hypothesis. I believe that we are swapping from About New tab to example.com, but that the parent process hears about the load of the initial about blank and uses that to continue the test. And because uses that to continue the test, it does not wait until About New tab is loaded. I think that's the problem. So how do we wait? If there's going to be a process swap, how do we wait? Well, I actually think browser loaded gives us that capability. Browser test utils, browser loaded. I think it, whoopsie daisy, spelled that wrong. I think browser loaded is prepared to deal with process swapping. Isn't it? I guess not. There's something in here that's prepared for process swapping. Frame loader created. Wait for new window. That's not enough. Load URI. We tell it to load a URI. I wonder if we should be awaiting this, because that's going to wait for so there are a couple of mysteries here actually. Hold on. Question: why didn't E10s utils should load URI in browser return false for the privileged about content process? I can probably reproduce that locally and try and answer that. And so we need to answer that. What happens if we await loading example.com? Because I think that's prepared to handle the frame loader swap, or the process swap. Blah, 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 blah. Instead of doing this, we can do this, and then wait for event, load URI. We also want to wait for the browser to stop, because at that point the location change event will have occurred, and location change is what ultimately tells us whether or not we can go back. Location change, browser stopped. Is browser stop prepared to deal with? Okay, browser stopped attaches to the browser element, and I believe during a process flip actually should survive. Like, I think State changed, browser loaded, expected URI. That's the other thing. We should wait until example.com is loaded. I think based on this, based on what I know about the progress listeners that are attached to the browser element, those survive process flips. We did that on purpose because you know, there's some plumbing in place to swap the progress listeners whenever you do a process swap, so that, you know, any progress listeners that you've attached don't have to be manually detached and then reattached. They'll just kind of survive and pretend like the process swap didn't occur. But we have to account for the possibility when you're doing those process swaps that about blank will load, the initial about blank that will hear about it. Okay, so I have two things to do. What happens if we await loading example.com? Here's what we're going to do. First, we're going to try and answer this first question. Why didn't this return false? First of all, can we reproduce that locally? Also, let's play a sound effect, because it's been a while since I've done that.
It's me, Mario!
I'm having to do that on my cell phone with Wacky Morning DJ, because I didn't bring my tablet home. Thankfully, Wacky Morning DJ, if you're curious, it just runs a little server on my laptop, and I can connect to it with whatever web browser I want. Even, you know, anyone else on my private network here could just like connect to the server and then just start playing sounds on my machine. It's maybe a little bit of an annoying security hole. I also realized, speaking of sounds, that I wanted to have some music playing in the background. So let me just like turn on some sweet jams. Are those playing? Very lightly. There we go. I don't know if you can hear that. But let's have those playing in the background. These are, oh, that's maybe too loud. This is from freemusicarchive.org. Please do not sue me. These are apparently under Creative Commons attribution. So this is from Broke for Free, and I will drop a link in the agenda. Music. This is the same artist. If you like binging with Babish on YouTube, which, like me, this is the same person who puts that music together. Is the music better now? And Smurfy says now better. Okay, good. Oh, that might even still be too loud. It's too intense. Nope. Too intense. Just some soothing backbeats. Just so that you don't have to necessarily listen to my squeaky chair. Unfortunately, this does not have a volume control, so I'm just like hacking the audio element and setting the volume in the console. So that's what you do when you know how the browser works. Okay, so let's run the test. Let's pump up the font first so you can see what I'm doing. So I'm gonna run the test, and I want to log whether or not must change in process is true. Must change process. Must change process. Just a little bit of logging, and then we're gonna skip this one test because we don't care about it. Let's run the test. Mock test, browser, bug, what was it? 724.239.239.js. Oh, this gets flipped automatically? Okay, because before, hang on, let's do this one instead. Yeah, wash your hands, wash your hands. Okay, so the test passed. Let's take a look at what the logging said. Wait for browser load, must change process, false. Why? Why? Why is must change process false? That is the question. So should load URI in browser. Let's go to E10S utils. What we do is we currently check to see what the remote type is, required remote type. Let's have it so that required remote type. theory, I can do all of this. Oh, I think I have to mock build faster. In theory, I could just do this with a debugger. Maybe that would be best, actually, but for now, I'll just do it this way. No judgment. No judgment. You can printf debug. There's nothing wrong with printf debugging. Happy mistakes. Happy trees. Okay. Required remote type is web. And apparently the current remote type is web? What? What? That doesn't make sense. Browser stopped about new tab. Dump. Browser process type. Browser.frame loader. Remote type. Browser process type undefined. Did I get that wrong? Browser frame loader. Maybe it's supposed to be just browser. We're gonna make it through, people. Everything's gonna be great. So yeah, privileged about is the browser process type. So this is very mysterious. That's what is expected. But etns util says that we don't need to flip the process type. Current remote type is browser remote type. And then what's the required remote type? It's saying, so current remote type is browser remote type. Dump. Current remote type. I feel like I should have like the Binging with Babish voice. I'm using my laptop mic today because I only have like, I have this little USB hub. I've got the new MacBook Pro, which has like all of the USB-C ports, but no normal old school USB ports. And current remote type, required remote type is web. Must change process. So this should dump must change process. Maybe we make the decision later on. I was going to use my really high quality microphone, but the little USB hub that I'm using to connect everything is going through a single USB-C port, and it just could not handle the traffic from my webcam and the microphone and my mouse and keyboard. I presumably send very little traffic, but the microphone and the camera was too much to send through my little USB hub here. So that's too bad. Must change process true. Okay. If we already have a content process and the load will be handled using document channel, then we can skip switching for now and let document channel do it during the response. Oh. Document channel is going to do the process flip. So that's the thing. It's possible that document channel is going to take care of doing the process flip. In which case, that's like the new mechanism that's going to do process flipping for us. Part of it anyways. Yeah, that's why. That's why must change process is false. So I think the mechanism that the test was using to determine whether or not the process was going to change is flawed, because it's not used to document channel. This test was written in like old school times, so it shouldn't use this anymore. I wonder if that requires a comment here. returns whether or not a URI is supposed to load in a particular browser given its current remote type. New frame loading. Note that must change process might be false even if a process flip will occur, because in this case document channel is taking care of the process flip for us rather than the front end code. RAM, browser, the browser to check, some of this is just obvious. URI, what is it going to be, a string? Is it a string? URI, create fixable URI. I think URI in this case is a string, yeah. String. The URI to check, URI that will be checked to see if it can load in the browser. Param, multi-process, Boolean, optional. Whether or not multi-process Firefox, multi-process tabs are enabled, defaults to true. Remote subframes, Boolean, optional. Whether or not multi-process subframes are enabled, defaults to false. Param flags. I think that's going to be a number. Flags as these are NSI web navigation flags. What are they used for? Used to fix up the URL in the event that it needs to clean up the URL in the event that it needs fixing via the URI fix up service. Number optional. Defaults to NSI web navigation, load flags, none. And then it returns an object with the following properties. URI object. I think is that one's going to be URI object. Yeah. The fixed up URI that was generated for the check. What else? Required remote type. string. The remote type that was computed for the browser that is required to load the URI must change process. Boolean. Whether or not the front end will be required to change the process, not change, flip the process in order to view the URI. Note, must, how will I do this? Must change process might be false, even if a process flip will occur. In this document, in this case, documents take care of the process flip rather than front end code. Okay. And finally, what's the last thing that's being passed? New frame loader. Is that with a capital L? No. And that's a Boolean. Whether or not a new frame loader will need to be created in order to browse to this URI. Presumably. Okay. Why? What's the difference between new frame loader and must change process? You'd think one would imply the other. Well, we only want new frame loader if new tab. Consume. URI is not equal to about new tab. Leaving about new tab from a used to be preloaded browser should run the process selection algorithm again. Get attribute preloaded state is consumed. So in the event that, oh, I don't know what this is for. New frame loader. You want to try and understand code? Try and document it. Because then you're forced to try and understand what the F is going on. New frame loader is false. Defaults to false. Let's take a look at when this code was introduced. I'm gonna guess that I reviewed it. That's gonna be my fear. I reviewed this. Yeah, I did. I did. Why? This was back in 2018. Here's, thankfully we have a really good comment here from Jay Ryans. For the preloaded browser that loads about new tab, there are several blocks that detect cases where we move away from new tab and want to rerun process selection, possibly grow the set of content processes. We haven't yet reached the max. This implies a potential process flip from content process A, where it was loading new tab, to content process B to hold the web content for this tab. This machinery ends up not interacting too well with responsive design mode. In particular, the following steps: open a new tab, make sure it's the preloaded browser. Open responsive design mode, navigate to some URL. Navigating away from new tab like this triggers the various blocks that want a remoteness flip. Unfortunately, responsive design mode is prepared for content to flip around once it's already open. I agree that one or two are probably not ideal. Split in content about pages into their own content process. If a user in its RDM pointed out about new tab, can we start by browsing the tab to about blank instead? Is that what we currently do? Oh, we've got a new responsive design mode in Nightly that is gonna skip. Oh, this is the Binging with Babish music. Yeah. Hey everyone. Welcome to Binging with Babish. My name is we're going to be making some source code. Sauce. How does this work? And then I reviewed it. Void. Extract logic around whether a browser needs to change processes. Get a new frame loader because of preloading from load URI. And we put it all into etns utils. So you used to live inside of excuse me, browser.js. Excuse me. See that sneezing in to the crook of my arm? That's good. Health sec. Current remote type. We check to see whether or not leaving about new tab from a used to be preloaded browser should run the process selection algorithm again. Oh, I remember now. I remember now. It's because we have this wacky process. So, okay. I remember. I think I remember. We've got this code that knows, oh, geez. All right, how does this work? We preload about home, or actually, we preload about new tab. So the one I'm about to open, for example, has actually been open for a while and just sits in the background. That way we can like show it up as soon as possible. And one of the things we noticed is that if you did that with etns enabled, is that it would create this separate content process for it because, you know, there's just this document hanging around in the background and we loaded about home in it. If you only have a single tab open, we would open up another content process and we would load about home in it, or about new tab. And we didn't like that the additional memory overhead for this like single document. So what we did instead was that we made the some really sort of deep changes in Gecko for this particular case, where instead of creating a new content process for the preloaded browser, the preloaded about new tab, we make the preloaded new tab page choose a pre-existing content process to load about new tab in. And then when we navigate from about new tab to somewhere else, that's when we do the process flip. And I think that's what this thing is all about. Whenever you transition from preloaded state to consumed, that's what we need to figure out. What does that mean? Preloaded state, there's like all this really silly stuff. Is preloaded browser. The parent knows which one's preloaded. Consumed. Set attribute. Attach the form fill controller. Consume the browser. So when we open up a new tab, we clear out the preloaded browser, and then we set it to consumed. And what that means is that if we have one of these things where we have a consumed about new tab, and we're about to transition to something that's not about new tab, then we say that we are going to need a new frame loader, and we will be changing the process. Got it. That's what this is for. Now, I don't exactly know what the difference is between new frame loader and must change process. Oh, because back in the day, they both would have been web content processes. Right. Whether or not the new frame loader will be created in order to browse to this URI. This is for non-fission cases, for non-fission, this is important if we're transitioning from a web content process to another web content process, but want to force the creation of a new web content process. Okay. Okay, I think I get it now. I get it. That's why we learn. Okay, or that's how we learn. So now what I want to do over here to actually fix things. So to answer that question, why didn't it return false? Because document channel is taking care of the process flip for us and not the front end. The should load URI in browser stuff is actually not being used properly here. Or at least it's been modified such that it no longer works as expected. Okay, so a couple things we want to do. Instead of doing must change in process, we're going to say await browser stopped. About new tab, we're going to load URI. We're going to await this. And we're going to await browser stopped. http://example.com. Okay. We will need to wait for about new tab to be loaded so that it goes into the session history. Let's flush the, well, no, because this process flip will cause a flush automatically, so we don't have to worry about that. Let's run this test now and see what happens. If it passes, I'd like to push this to try and see what happens. Yeah. Simulation. Ooh, doesn't do anything. Why not? Browser loaded example.com. Waiting for browser load of example.com. Browser loaded example.com. Waiting for browser stopped. Browser stopped. We should do it this way. Stopped. Stopped equals. This is my stank face. Still doesn't like it. Browser loaded example.com. Why doesn't it like it? Because it doesn't stop. Waiting for. With the process flip. Oh, sorry, browser test utils. Let's wait for new window and load URI. Can load URI in remote type. Oh. Is that gonna dump waiting for Zool frame loader created? Loading example.com. Waiting for the Zool frame loader created. That's good. Waiting for browser stopped. Browser loaded example.com. Is it necessary to wait for browser stopped? Kinda. Browser stop. Why isn't it stopping? What's it waiting for? Where is browser testing? Stopped. It's using browser stopped here. That's wait, open new foreground tab. Okay. Saw state F0001. Saw state C0010. And it says browser loaded example.com. That's right. So expected URI. Did I just put in the wrong expected URI? Example. Oh. Interesting. It wants the backslash. All right. Okay. All right. That's unintuitive, but all right. Hey, all right. Now what we're gonna do, we're gonna get rid of some of our logging. We don't need it anymore. Get rid of that. We're gonna get rid of the logging. So basically we're gonna revert this. We're gonna keep that comment. URIs aren't valid without a slash after the host. URI fix up stuff, man. I'm so used to just the URI fix up stuff, just taking care of it for me. Sloppy URLs, man, example.com, what, you know what I'm talking about, but you need the slash after the host. Or is that URLs? URIs versus URLs, that's the question. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna verify this in headless mode. Let's run this a bunch of times, and if this goes well, I'm gonna push it to try, and then I wanna look at other stuff. While we're waiting, I'm gonna try freestyle rapping to this beat. Hold up. Let me turn up the music. Sitting in my basement, trying to code, wondering how everybody's doing, Wash your hands, wash your hands, wash your hands. If you've got plans, make sure that you wash your hands. That's very important, yo. Sometimes my rhymes don't rhyme, but it's all part of the flow. This sweet backbeat is from Broke for free. You can get it online. It is for free. It's Creative Commons licensed. You don't need to pay, but make sure you attribute Broke for free. Alright. I did my best. How'd we do here with the test? It's gonna run for a while, actually. So while we're waiting for that to run, I think what I want to focus on next is this other thing that was on the agenda, which is getting this patch. So the very exciting part of this patch was like the sort of the caching of About Home. There's a patch that's actually up to do the reading from the cache, and you can take a look at it right now, right here. So let me put the patch in here. Patch. And one of the things that was brought up in a review recently was that I was taking pass. All right, I'm gonna pause my thought there because I'm gonna get this push to try. Okay. Do I have any other commits on this? I do. Shelve, update central, unshelve. So one big fat command, what it's going to do is it's going to take all of my changes that are uncommitted, stash them away, switch over to central, and then unstash them and replay them on central. Because I'm going to create a new commit on top of central. Woo! And right like that, I get this really interesting piece of information. That's great. Thank you, linting. I never use this. Well, I will remove it whenever you know, I'm done unshelving. Smurf D said that my rapping wasn't bad. Maybe we can try a little bit more while we wait, while I try and commit this stuff. All right. Here we go. Yeah. Here we go. Yeah. Gotta use Mercurial to make your code. I tried to rhyme with code and it didn't work. But that's okay, because we're working from home today. Drinking some tea, waiting for Mercurial. I don't know what I can do with my flow to rhyme with Mercurial. Keep thinking about it. Mercurial. What rhymes with Mercurial? Nocturnal? Not really. Not really. Need to work on my rhymes, but that's okay. I don't do it for my day job. Don't do it for my day job. I'm gonna bail out now because Mercurial is done. But we had some fun. Voluming down now. Back to code. All right, so I'm going to get rid of this variable here. And then I'm gonna create a command. What was this thing called? Bug. Brief factor, browser, bug 74239 to take into account about blank loads after a process flip. And who should review this? Who would be good to review this? Maybe Jared. Haven't picked on Jared in a while. T-Bod T writes, posted this in the Twitch chat, but Evernote says you're not checking that. Is there supposed to be a 1 pixel gray line on the top of browser window on Mac? I believe the answer is yes. Trying to remember why that is. I think if you have like, hang on. there's... I've read about this. Let me turn on dark mode. Yeah, I think that's part of like the theme. Like whenever you have a dark window, macOS forces the window to have like this light line at the top so that there's a clear visual separation. I think that's just part of how macOS works. Okay. I'm going to go into more detail actually in my commit message there. With the privileged about content process enabled, we do a process flip when navigating between about new tab and example.com, which means that we might see the initial about blank of the new doc shell load after the process flip and interpret that as HTTP example.com finishing loading. This refactoring does two things. Adds more documentation to what was it called? E10s utils should load URI in browser, since it was being used kind of incorrectly in the test. Two, makes it more explicit that we want example.com to load and not any old page like about blank. T-Bot says, yeah, but in this case, there's a line around the entire window, not just the top. And it still looks like this in Firefox in light theme. Yeah, there's still a gray line at the top in the light theme too, for sure. I don't know if this is gonna work. I don't know if you can. Do you see this? Whenever I know this might be ruining everything, but there is a gray line. I don't know. My screen might make no sense right now, but there's a gray line at the top of the window in light mode as well. And is it around the entire window? Well, there's like a drop shadow of some kind. Let's see. I don't see it around the sides, maybe the bottom. There's like an inner one here for the DevTools, but that's DevTools drawing that. The bottom, I think there's one at the bottom, but I can't zoom there. There is one at the bottom. What's up, Jay Ryans? I noticed you just joined the room. First of all, Matrix is great. Thank you so much for your work on Matrix and Riot. It's fantastic. The second thing is, I was just modifying some code and adding comments to some code that you wrote back in 2018 and that I reviewed. So it's like, wow, everything's come full circle. So good to see you. All right, I've created this commit. Now let's push it up to try. I think if I look at my try index, my most recent one was the one that I used to... Yeah, this is the one I want to reuse. So I'm going to use mock try again. Just that, mock try again. What rhymes with mercurial? I don't know. Gonna look it up on the internet, yo. Rhyming dictionary. Rhyme zone. I've been here before. Mercurial. Yeah, I was kind of screwed as soon as I tried to rhyme with mercurial. These are really a stretch. I could have done venereal. Oh. Okay, so that's a landmine. Do not attempt to rhyme when freestyle rapping. This is a pro tip. When you're freestyle rapping, do not attempt to rhyme with the word mercurial, because you're stuck. Put it at the beginning of the sentence, not at the end. Okay, so I pushed to try. We're gonna wait for that to cook. I'm gonna put that over here. Maybe or maybe not. That's gonna help. But now we are blocked on try build. Okay, so this patch, like I was saying before, does this really does the work of reading out a cached about home that might exist in the HTTP cache. But I got some review feedback that is super, super valid from Gijs, which was that I was trying to use preferences as almost like a locking mechanism to avoid dealing with corrupted cache. So here's the story. You can, oh, is the Twitch stream gone? Oh, I've dropped some frames, but the Twitch stream is apparently back. If you reload, so the people who are watching on Twitch, if you're seeing this, then you reloaded the page. If you're not seeing this, I don't know how to get through to you because I'm not streaming to Twitch for you right now. But reload, maybe tell all your friends, maybe say in the Twitch chat, you need to reload the page. Reload the page if the stream went down. Refresh. So, excuse me. This cache, you write to it asynchronously. And whenever you're writing to disk, when you're persisting to disk, there's absolutely something you need to take into consideration, which is that you can crash. You know, like a crash can occur at any moment. And if you're persisting stuff in the middle, if you're in the middle of sending stuff to disk and you crash, then how do you handle that? Because now that stuff is all probably corrupted. And what do you do? Like, when you restart, if we read from a cache that's corrupted, how do we behave? How do we detect that it's corrupted? And one of the things that I was considering was, okay, well, maybe we can like generate a hash of the written information and then almost like a checksum and then include it along with the cached information. And so that we have at least a checksum. So we compare what is cached and we do a calculation and we check it with the checksum, and if they don't match, then we ignore it. There's already infrastructure in place to skip, like if anything goes wrong, then we fall back to just dynamically rendering about home. That was like a very clear requirement from the beginning, where if anything goes wrong with the cache, then we just throw up our hands, throw away the cache, and just revert to loading about home dynamically, because we don't want to load a broken page ever for about home, because it's the first thing the user sees. You really need to have it to be solid. So if your cache is unreliable, then quickly flip back to the dynamic loading code path. So that works. But what I was using was a preference to, I was setting a preference for every stage of the writing of the cache. So for example, I would say we are writing the cache, and I would set a numeric preference to be like 1. And then when we've written the markup of the cache, I would say, okay, now we're starting to write, so it's being set to 2. And then whenever we're done writing all sections of the cache, then we say it's written, and we set the pref to 3. But the problem is that cache, like preferences themselves, also suffer from the same problem. It's just moving the goalpost a little bit. Where now, you know, the writing of a preference is also something that we have to take care of, or we have to consider whenever, like a crash could occur before we flush the preferences to disk. So we've just moved the problem, which is no good. So I was thinking about it. I was like, well, what can we use instead of a preference? We could try this hashing thing. The problem with the hashing is that in order to like do the checksum or the hashing, you have to like slurp out all of the contents of the cache and do the calculation and then the check. And that's whenever you have enough information to determine whether or not what you had stored, what is in the cache, is still valid. And that, we're trying to save work during startup. We're trying to avoid work, and that sounds like work. And I wanted to avoid that if possible. So I was thinking about it, and I was examining the HTTP cache code, because that's the cache that we're using, that I was advised to use, is the HTTP cache. And I realized that there's this metadata stuff. So a cache entry, this is the like thing that we're writing to. And the way we write to it is we get this output stream. We open an output stream on a cache entry and we write to it. And any time previously, whenever we were like wanting to update the cache, we would open up a new output stream and overwrite the previous, the previous cache entry stuff. And that's whenever you can have problems if you're overwriting something. But then I realized that there's this other chunk of information that we were also using, which is metadata. So metadata elements. These are things that you can read and write to synchronously on the cache entry. And the way it works is like it's an in-memory key value store, and then it's periodically flushed to disk. But whenever you've modified the metadata on a cache entry, it is the last thing to be written, according to the people on the Neko team. So here's the new plan. Instead of overwriting a cache entry with new content whenever we're like updating the cache, anytime we update the cache, let's throw out or doom the old cache entry and write a new one, and then make sure that we write something to the metadata as the last step. That way, whenever we start up the browser and we look for the cache entry, we'll hopefully find either the old one, we'll hopefully find the new one. But if we had crashed, then we'll either find the old one and we can retrieve the old one and maybe that'll work. Or we'll find the new one, but the version info won't, or like the metadata info will not have been written. And at that point, we know this cache is busted and we'll just switch back to the dynamic generation part. So that's what I think I'm gonna do, is I'm gonna rely on the fact that the metadata, if it exists, if it was written last, then we know that everything that was written earlier made it. And also, instead of overwriting, like it works kind of like hand in hand with the fact that we instead of overwriting a previous cache entry, we will create a new one every time we populate the cache. We'll throw away the old one and create a new one. And that I think is safer. And there's like pre-existing stuff in here that allows us to doom and open a new empty entry. There's this method called recreate that allows us to do that. And so that's what I'm using in the new version of the patch. And I want to get that posted. So let's take a look. I want to get that posted, and I want to respond to the review comments. I think I'm going to go a little bit longer. I've got a meeting in half an hour, but I want to go a little bit longer. So if you're if this goes long, I mean, feel free to leave if you've got other stuff to do. But I'm going to stream a little while longer because I don't have to worry about this room getting taken over because I'm at home. Whereas in the office, I have a room booked for a particular window of time, so I have to leave at a particular time and tear down. But I'm in my basement, so I can do whatever I want. I can make a mess, which I have, obviously. Okay, so I'm gonna build this. I gotta build this. And then I'm also gonna post it up for like what I've currently got. I think I had already cleaned it up. I'm gonna post it up for review. Let's take a quick peek at it. Cache init. I got rid of the phase stuff. So that phase was the phase. Good. Phase was the name of the preference that I was setting every time we progressed through the writing. This all looks right. So this right here is where we check to see whether or not we can get the metadata information. And if we can't, then we close the streams, and that's enough to tell the content process, the privileged about content process, like, whoa, all right, I guess our cache is busted. I'll fall back. I'll fall back to the dynamic generation. If we have the version information, then we're good. And if the version information doesn't match the cache version that we are expecting, then we do. That's another case where we'll just like close the. Well, I guess we should. I guess we should close the streams here too. Yeah, because things have gone wrong here. We want to make sure that the content process is aware that, you know, the cache version was invalidated. This is a mechanism that we use to, in the event that we ship a new version of About Home or something where we've changed the layout, any pre-existing cache we probably want to throw it at. That's how that works. So we can bump this number, and that way, you know, in particular builds, we can say like, if you have a pre-existing cache, throw it away, because otherwise we're going to show old stuff, and it might break. Okay. So that's one thing I want to do here is I'm going to go to browser glue, and I'm going to go for the word doom. Yeah, we want to close the pipes. Dooming and closing strings. As we write here. Okay. I also wrote up a bunch of documentation for this, and I want to make sure it still makes sense. Okay, I'm going to read this documentation out loud. Hopefully by reading it out loud, I will be able to like determine whether or not it is even like legit English. So here goes. The About Home startup cache. By default, a user's browser session starts with a single window and a single tab pointed at About Home. This means that it's important to ensure that About Home loads as quickly as possible to provide a fast overall startup experience. About Home, which is functionally identical, hang on, I'm going to put this inside one of these, which is functionally identical to About New tab, is generated dynamically by calculating an appropriate state object and passing state object in the parent process, and passing it down to a content process into the React library in order to render the final interactive page. This is problematic during the startup sequence, as calculating that initial state can be computationally expensive and requires multiple reads from the disk. The About Home startup cache is an attempt to address this expense. It works by assuming that between browser sessions, About Home usually doesn't need to change. Components of the About Home startup cache mechanism. There are three primary components to the cache mechanism. The HTTP cache is the first component. The HTTP cache is normally used for caching web pages retrieved over the network, but seemed like the right fit for storage of the About Home cache as well. The HTTP cache is usually queried by the networking stack when browsing the web. The HTTP cache is, however, not typically queried when accessing Chrome or resource URLs, so we have to do it ourselves manually for the About Home case. This means giving About Home special capabilities for populating and reading from the HTTP cache. In order to avoid potential security issues, this requires that we sequester About Home, About New tab in their own special content process. The privileged About content process exists for this purpose and is also used for About logins and About certificate. Excuse me. The HTTP cache lives in the parent process, and so any read and write operations need to be initiated in the parent process. Thankfully, however, the HTTP cache accepts data using NSI output stream and serves it using NSI input stream. We can send NSI input stream over the message manager and convert an NSI input stream into an NSI output stream, so we have everything we need to efficiently communicate with the privileged About content process to save and retrieve page data. The official documentation for the HTTP cache can be found here. The singleton component lives inside of browser glue to avoid having to load yet another JSM out of the OmniJava file in the parent process during startup. About Home startup cache is responsible for feeding the... Oh, I think there was some commentary from one of my reviewers about this documentation that I want to address. Is the About redirector in the parent or child in this case? What about the NSI About New tab service? And what's the difference between that and About New tab child service and About Home startup cache child? Yeah, good question. Okay. This is down here. We talked about being used for About Welcome. Do you imagine this being useful for other content pages that need special privileges as well? Cache updated versions. Okay, well, let's get there. This singleton component lives inside of browse glue to avoid blah blah blah. Is responsible for feeding the privileged about content process with the NSI input streams that it needs to present the initial about home document. It is also responsible for populating the cache with updated versions of about home that are sent by the privileged about content process. Possibly. For now, however, about home is special in that it needs to be able to read and write from the cache, whereas for something like about welcome, there are multiple states or multiple variations on a page. But once we've chosen a variation, we only need to render it. We don't need to find a way of saving that rendered document. So we could, for example, send down the information for the initial about welcome using this code path. Alternatively, we might want to investigate doing that once this has landed. In the meantime, I would suggest continuing to use the shared data structure for now. Okay. Right. Oh, our music. Our music from the beginning. About home startup cache is responsible. Yeah, I've already read this paragraph. Since accessing the HTTP cache is asynchronous, there is an opportunity for a race where the cache can either be accessed and available before the initial about home is requested or after. To accommodate for both cases, the about home startup cache constructs NSI pipe instances, which it sends down to the privileged about content process as soon as one launches. If the HTTP cache is already available, cache entry is already available by the time when the process launches, and cached data cached data is available, we connect the cache to the NSI pipes to stream the data down to the privileged about content process. If the HTTP cache is not yet available, we hold references to these NSI pipe instances and wait until the cache entry is available. Only then do we connect the cache entry to the NSI pipe instances to send the data down to the privileged about content process. So the about home startup cache child. This is where Heis had some questions. So the singleton component, this singleton component lives inside of the privileged about content process and is initialized as soon as the message is received from the parent. That includes the NSI input streams that will be used to potentially load from the cache. Is the about redirector, okay, when the about redirector in the privileged about content process notices that a request has been made to about home, it asks NSI about new tab service to return a new NSI channel for that document. What about the NSI new tab service? So maybe I should talk about those. About new tab service. The about new tab service is used by the about redirector in both the parent and content processes to determine how to handle attempts to load about home, about new tab, and about home and about new tab. Okay. In the parent process, the parent process gets its own version of about new tab service. Oh. there are distinct versions of the About New Tab service. One for the parent process and one for content processes. Yeah, okay, what else does he ask? What about, what is the difference between that and About New Tab child service? There are distinct versions of it. One for the parent process. I think this one's called... and one for content processes. Inherits from base About New Tab service. When running within the privileged About content process, the About redirector. Okay, hang on. The About redirector, when running inside of a privileged About content process, knows to direct attempts to load About New Tab and About Home to About New Tab child service. Knows to, oh wait, no, just About Home. About, knows attempts to load About Home to services. There's a method that it calls in particular. Cache child, yeah. Method. This method, this special method is used, this method, not special, this method is then responsible for choosing whether or not to return an NSI channel for the cached document or for the dynamically generated version of About Home. When the About redirector in the privileged About notes the request is made to About asks to return a channel for the document. So hopefully I've answered that question. So I've added a section about New Tab service in the next revision that will hopefully answer this. Okay. It seems like it would be useful to have telemetry. Yes, indeed. Telemetry. Filed telemetry mechanism. Bug is filed for that, which I hope to work on after this and the cache writing mechanism are landed. It's a good question. So Kate's asking about whether or not the fallback is likely in the event that the cache is not available in time. It's a good question. Some hard drive, the cache is ultimately being read from disk. Slow enough disks. If a disk is slow enough, we might reach this point and realize before the cached document can be read from disk and piped down. I think it's really going to depend on the machine, and that's a good argument for adding telemetry in such and such to get a sense of how often we fall back. Okay. 3 less than, good call. You're right. I've made the comparison more strict. We don't allow newer versions either now. And I think there was another comment in here. Something about coercion. Seems like a pretty reasonable approach, although I can imagine it would be easy to forget to update this since it's very isolated. I wonder if this is actually some kind of yeah. We should definitely make sure that the people who ultimately control the layout of About Home, About New Tab, are familiar with this mechanism. I don't know if there's some kind of release checklist or something. Count do you for About Home. Okay. I'm gonna mark that as done. Do you also want to release the reference to this cache entry? That's a good call. Yeah, sure. I think we want to do that. Let's just double check. When we shut down. Good idea. Thanks. Thanks, Kate. Do we use this cache for About New Tab loads, or is there never any point? For now, I'm focusing on using this cache strictly for About Home. I suppose we can think about adapting it for the About New Tab case down the line, but okay. So I talked to the Neko team, and one of the things I learned is that the metadata on an NSI cache entry is written last. This means that we can, so my new approach for integrity checking is to throw away a pre-existing NSI cache entry when overwriting the cache, and then make sure that the metadata for the version is written as the final step. It is supposed to be written last. This means that upon checking the entry, if we don't find the version, then we know that the cache writes didn't complete, and we fall back to dynamic page generation. Okay. So let me submit this. Let me amend this. And then let's run build again, and let's just test it real quick. My meeting's in 10 minutes. This is a plug for the form. What did you think of this episode, by the way? So there's a form here to rate the episode. If you fill in this form, a couple things. First of all, there you can let me know what you thought. What do you think of the freestyle rapping? Is that a good idea? How's the microphone? I'm not using my special microphone. Should I invest in another USB adapter or something so I can use my better microphone? Or is this microphone fine? How is the content of the episode? How's my camera angle? How's the music? Tell me everything you thought. And if you click on this form, one of the last things you get to see when you submit the form is a thank you, is an image of me giving you a very special a safety message. So there's some inspiration as well. Fill out the form. So I encourage you to smash that form link and hit that bell or something. Isn't that what all the... I sound like an old man, but like, isn't that what the kids are doing? Smash that like, ring the bell, ding, 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 the internet. All right, let's run this build. I think this profile has a cache entry. So, yeah, this was a cached document. It's not about home, obviously, but it was cached yesterday. And this is JavaScript that is running on the page. So the cache is working. So that's working. Cool, 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 cool. I haven't written tests for this, but that is a thing that I'm gonna probably want to do in a follow-up bug, actually. Because this patch is already like humongous enough. So I'm gonna split out the tests into a separate bug and a separate patch. The good news is that all of this code is inert while it's disabled. There's a pref and like none of the code does anything. So I'll land the tests after, and then we also have to land the part that writes the cache. That's going to be really interesting. Hopefully I can do that later this week or next week, or at least post it up for review. That does some really fun stuff with React DOM server inside of a worker to generate the page. And then we've got the two halves of the puzzle. And then we can start thinking about tests and telemetry, and probably we're gonna have to do some work to correct some parts of the cache document because I believe the about home and about new tab currently use data URIs or blob URIs for some of the images, and that's not gonna work when you persist those to disk because those URIs are generated dynamically at runtime. They don't survive restarts, so we're gonna have to switch those out to use something else. Gonna have to think about that. Anyways, I'm gonna call it. Well, let me post this up for review actually again. Submit tip. Posting up my patch for. I have to turn up my backbeat so I can actually do some rapping here. Hang on, get that back. Here we go. Yo, here we go. Putting my patch up for review, hoping someone likes to look at you whenever you are writing code on the internet. That's how it goes. That's how it goes. Live hacking from the basement. There is a casement of filament from my printer right here, but it's not plastic that biodegrades, unfortunately. Well, actually, it's PLA, and that's supposed to break down, but I just read that in Toronto, our composting system and recycling system don't break it down the way it should be broke. So I'm trying to get woke about plastic recycling. I gotta figure out how to get rid of this PLA. Because if you don't break it down, then it just stays for like thousands of days. How do you break down PLA? What do you say? I don't know. All right, so this is posted up for review. Needs review. There we go. So we'll wait until we hear back from my reviewers on all this stuff. Hopefully they dig it. And that's it. I'm gonna end the stream here. Thank you so much for watching this special working from home edition of The Joy of Coding. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you liked. Let me know what you didn't like. And take care of yourselves, take care of your families, take care of your friends, wash your hands, and stay inside. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you next week. Take care. Bye-bye. Oh, hold on. We gotta do the outro music. Hang on. I gotta do the outro music. I'm gonna trigger it from my phone. Outro music. The joy of coding. See ya.